Binders episode, the next instalment of the podcast. We've got a really, really exciting episode for you today, featuring our first guest on the show that we're releasing, Matt Binden. He is a head teacher specialising in working with kids with special needs and who are at risk of permanent exclusion. He's a really, really experienced guy. He's a good colleague of mine, really good friend, and he's been through a lot of learning to do with his mental health and how he's responded to his work-life balance in the past. And it's a really, really great episode. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. We're going to talk about family dynamics around the takeaway. We're going to talk, do you share, do you not share? How many onion bargees is too many onion bargees? And how do you mask the smell of fish? In terms of our other Would You Rathers, we're going to talk about hope versus admiration. And tied into that, we go into kind of approval seeking versus people pleasing and some of the lessons that Matt's learned along the way on that one. We're going to explore attitudes to work stress, signs, symptoms, things that Matt's learned along the way, his mental health toolkit, which is a really interesting approach. We're going to talk about overwhelm versus guilt, being able to say no, emotional eating, the dying cat, and then we'll wrap up with our takeaways. It's an action-packed show, guys, but it's a really, really great one. So we hope you enjoy it.
On the microphone on your headphone?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he sounds as good as we do, Brad, with our fancy...
You two look like you're either DJing or landing jets.
For fuck's sakes.
Good. Well, we've started as we mean to go on. Matt, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and chat to us this morning. It's going to be fun. The general basis of the show is that we're gonna just chat about some things, some stupid stuff, some less stupid stuff, and just get your thoughts and your views, with the idea being that actually the two listeners that we've got out there might actually take something from this. So you've got lots and lots of really useful experience. So we're just going to kind of jump into things really and go from there, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, I'm not used to you being nice to me, so this is kind of slightly unnerving to begin with.
Nibbo, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, mate. Okay, so Binders, what we're doing really is trying to have an easy starter segue into a conversation, which might eventually end up talking about mental health. But I think we've decided that actually just going to a guy and saying, "Tell me about your mental health," is not the way to get anyone to talk about the subject of male mental health. But everyone loves talking about takeaways. So if we were to say to you, maybe tonight you're getting a takeaway, what's that takeaway? What does it involve? What are you going for?
So in our house, there's a whole process and it usually starts with, "What's for tea?" And then if there's a pause, that's a good sign. And then there's kind of this subliminal communication of, does that mean what I think it means, which is takeaway? And then a usual debate between me and Mrs. B that goes, "What do you fancy? What do you fancy?" And it's always ever between Chinese and Indian. Like, there's never any other debate in Ivy Bridge. In a small town in Devon, that's pretty much it. And one of them you have to go out and pick up. So again, the takeaway choice is predicated on who can be bothered to get in the car and drive 4 minutes into the village. So in our house, Indian probably wins out most of the time.
And what are you going for? Have you got a go-to order, or did you mix it up?
So yeah, I mean, I'm quite excited about talking about takeaways, to be honest, because I could almost go into my takeaway backstory. So my takeaways have evolved over the years, and it started with, I used to be really, really bland and only have masala sauce and rice, but I like all the naan breads and onion bhajis and things. And now I have progressed my taste buds to something called a jamal puri, which I don't really know what it means. It's definitely got chicken in and it's quite hot, and that's all I can tell you. But yeah, I'm one of those that likes heat, but like not blow your balls off type stuff.
And you said one thing that interested me was you said the situation in our house. So what is the situation in your house? Who are you having the takeaway with? What's the story there?
So it's me and Mrs. Binden. we've been together for a long time, but we've got married in 2010. And then I've got two lads, one 15, one 12. And there's no universal takeaway in our house. There isn't one thing that we'll all eat. Son the younger only eats chips in any way, shape or form. So whether it's from the Chinese or the Indian or the chip shop. And son the older, who plays a lot of rugby and is kind of into his fitness and bits and pieces, is basically a dinosaur. He only eats meat. There's no veg. Like occasionally a carb will pass his lips. So yeah, whenever we order anything, it's always what is the least best option for all four of us to eat together.
I also like the idea that actually you refer to the wife as Mrs. Binden.
And that's not an accident.
Are you not on first name terms yet?
No, we're not that close after 15 years, to be fair. Or it's a power thing.
Are you sharey? Like all the food goes in the middle and everyone picks out of it what they want, or are you get away from my dinner? No, I ordered it for me.
So yeah, I mean, in our house, a couple of spoons of rice might stray, but other than that, no, we are absolutely territorial about takeaway food. And I think because we're a house of really well, no, that's not true. I'm a picky eater. The boys are quite selective, so yeah, like it's not a normal eating setup here. Everyone has something very specific.
I respect your discipline. This is my food. You can look at it, but that's about it.
And I think it borders on aggression, really. I think it's more if you watched a David Attenborough documentary and watched animals kind of eating, it's much more territorial than that, as opposed to discipline. It's just fear of touching anyone else's food.
So what was I going to go on to from there? Bradders, should we just get on and order that takeaway?
Yeah, I think let's dial that in. We've got a good perspective there about what's going on. I like it.
Like extras, side bits, all the little bits, the trimmings. Are you going for that, Binders? You said
absolutely. I mean, I've been known to do in 2 bags of onion bhajis quite comfortably. Yeah.
So hungry.
And I know. And like onion bhajis are life. And they like literally turn me inside out. I don't know whether it's this sort of podcast, but digestively they don't agree with me. But like I'm just living in the now. I know that it's not going to end well. But onion bhajis, cheese naan, and obviously all the poppadoms. Like otherwise, you just don't bother with a curry, do you?
How are you pinpointing that it's the bhajis that are the problem when you've got the curry, the cheese naan, the poppadoms?
I suppose my logic has always been from the fact that if you gave somebody 3 whole onions and they ate them as part of a meal, no, like the fact that they've been chopped up and covered in spice somehow makes it acceptable to eat that level of kind of, highly smelly vegetable.
Yeah,
you never see that as part of the 5 a day advert, do you? Just 3 onions. You're over halfway.
Get them down here.
Oh yeah, I like all the trimmings. So yeah, what do you reckon, Brad? Dial that in, order that takeaway.
Yeah, let's get that in. Let's get that ordered. Now, this is the bit where we start to go deep. Now we've covered our kind of starter questions, as we're calling them.
But we're basically really hungry now.
We're all hungry.
Do you know what? Bradders, I want to throw something to you just live, and tell me no, because we can edit it out. You know our first question? How about we sub in chicken? If Binders is going for a chicken curry,
yeah.
Have
you gone quiet because you hate that idea?
I'm watching the podcast evolve live.
Yeah,
the first would you rather question that we're going to ask?
Yeah.
How about instead of fish, we ask chicken?
Oh,
we don't have to.
We could do.
Fucking hell.
No, not now.
I don't think it works as well with chicken.
all right. We do fish. You do fish.
Okay.
I'll sit here.
Well, you've given it away now. Already, you've spoilt this, Nibbo.
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't.
Just leave. It's my question. You asked your question. Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Depends what the rather is.
So we're gonna get into this. We're gonna go straight in, deep level of thought process for you. Bang into solid like men's mental health, serious stuff with your first would you rather. So the question is, Would you rather look like a fish or smell like a fish?
Permission for a clarification question.
Oh, do we grant that permission?
Well,
Go on, Binders.
you just made a stupid suggestion, Nibbo. So let's let Binders make one
So,
too.
does my whole body look like a fish, or have I just got fish-like facial features? Because you said
I don't think your whole body looks like a fish. I think you'd be the kind of guy that walks down the street and someone goes, "Doesn't that bloke look like a fish?" And everyone he says it to goes like, "Fuck, he really does. He's quite fishy, isn't he?" I don't mean like full gills and scales, but just
so
resemble
my
a fish.
features are fish-like. Yeah. Okay.
See, I was thinking I'd gone full Moana, where Maui's like shark head.
I mean, I think for me, it's all about the smell, because I just doused myself in like Lynx Africa, maybe a bit of Atlantis, and splash on Brute that's got the really big nozzle. So I think I can do more about smelling like a fish than looking like a fish. Cheaper as well, as opposed to cosmetically changing my fish-like appearance and visage.
Binders, what a waste! Having learned that they've only just cast the new James Bond, but if you'd have let them know your cologne choices, they'd have been all over you with Lynx Africa and Brute.
I'm an advert from Nuts and Zoo in the late 90s, smelling like that. Niche cultural reference.
You're going with smelling, and you're going with the fact that you're going to try and mask it as best you can.
Yeah.
As opposed to looking like a fish and using excessive blusher to try and break that.
Yeah, essentially. And the way I look at the moment is pretty strong, so I wouldn't want to mess with that.
That's true. It's true. Yeah. It's got a good point. And no one can smell you on this podcast.
Well, what about the next question? Sorry, Bradders.
Yeah. Talking about, as I segue in seamlessly there, till Nibbo interrupted me. Talking about your qualities, and you do genuinely, we're having a bit of a laugh and playing along, but you have a lot of really, really positive qualities. And that's the line we're going to go down for our next Would You Rather. With the thought of, would you rather feel admiration or would you rather feel hope?
I suppose there feels like some sort of, so admiration is the question, admiration is the answer, and for me that comes from doing something good, and as I think about it, for like other people, so people admire what you do for your family, your friends, your work, for other people and bits and pieces, whereas hope feels a bit ethereal. Like hope is not, it's not a real thing, whereas admiration is as a result of something that's actually happened. It's something tangible. So I suppose for me that is about relationships with people. So I go admiration.
Yeah, good answer. You touched on your work, Binders, twice now, I think. I don't actually know what you do. What is it that you do? Yeah,
so currently I'm a head teacher at a special school.
Oh, okay.
And then after the Easter break, I'm moving to a role with a multi-academy trust, kind of working with young people and schools to support children on the edge of permanent exclusion and those that are really struggling with additional needs and are likely to need to go to a special school. But actually the aspiration being, if we do things differently for you, can you stay at your school where your mates are and where you live and all that sort of stuff? So yeah, I kind of work with, for the last 5 years, I've worked with young people with additional needs.
So this is going to be a bit wordy, but do you think maybe you might have a predisposition to want admiration from people, and it's that's drawn you into the nature of education that you work in, i.e. pupils with additional needs? I think there's more admiration in that type of education than just standard teaching.
Yeah, 100%. I am your definitive approval seeker. That kind of want of, little scratch under the chin. I think teachers as a profession, I always refer to it like fuel. like a well done for a teacher will keep you going at the end of term from someone you work with or a family, or a thank you from a kid for like 2 weeks when you're ill and you've run out of gas. So yeah, there's definitely something in that, and I'm really clear. I'm fortunate in the fact that you get into teaching to make a difference, etc., etc., and then you say, well, actually, I want to make a difference to the most vulnerable children. So I ended up being a head of year and doing loads of pastoral stuff. And then my viewpoint is, if you're going to make the biggest difference, you do that as a leader. So actually, I was really clear that my trajectory was about becoming a leader for children in the most complex circumstances. So, for me, that's all about admiration. I admire the people that I work with. I admire the kids in the circumstances they live in. I admire what their families do when sometimes those young people come home and they're chops ears billy-o, and actually they're the ones that are, living with them all day, every day. So I suppose admiration, it's just what I've been about for a super long time.
What I'm really interested in from that is that you described yourself as an approval seeker, and I think that sounds like a really positive disposition. And I think, but I personally, and I think other people as well, sometimes criticise themselves for being a people pleaser, and I wonder if there's a continuum between approval seeker and people pleaser, where one is negative and one is more positive. I don't know if you thought of it like
question. That. And I suppose that hasn't always been super positive. I think when I have been at a point where I've been a real approval seeker, I think that's at the end of a continuum of being a people pleaser. And the difference for me now is the absence of approval is not a negative thing. If I get approval, that's super positive. But if I don't get it, I'm not, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago as a kid, if I didn't get it, that was an issue. And almost, to a degree, an unhealthy driver.
Did you say 10 years ago as a kid?
I questioned that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
10 years, Binders?
I mean, as PE, originally as PE, maths is not my strong suit, and having managed budgets for a long time, the chief financial officer in our trust will also tell you that numbers are not my strong suit.
Sorry, you were saying.
I think if I didn't get that approval, and if I didn't get that people pleasing bit, I have got a really clear memory of an unhealthy chase for it. Is that I'll just work harder and do it quicker and more, and and I think as I've got older, I've just if I get approval and appreciation, that's cool, but it's not the driver that it used to be when I was younger. It was just, I felt a bit knobby, in my early 20s in particular, just pushing harder and harder and harder for it, and that being about what I needed from other people as opposed to what I need from me. So yeah, there's definitely been, and I think that's a really nuanced point to pick out between people pleaser and approval seeker, because it is, for me, it is different.
Aren't I clever?
It's really there's a couple of things I want to pick up on there, really, because obviously you and I used to work together, Matt, and so
work's a bit strong, but yeah, I'll acknowledge
we used to appear in the same school, looking great, and but actually, thinking back to that now, which actually feels like a really long time ago for me, and probably for you as well, I imagine.
Yeah, big time.
And actually listening to you talk now, and I think, I remember he used to get in. What time did you used to get into work?
I mean, it 6:30, and I'd be there till 6:30 at night, and then I would literally eat my tea at the table. Mate, it was relentless, and that mate, that is spot on. Is what that was about. Is that I think because I was new to that role and new to leadership, my answer to doing it better was do it harder and longer.
It struck me, and again, it just really took me back to those days, because I was like, God, I don't know anybody that works, harder than you. But not necessarily in the right way sometimes. I would be lazy, and I'd think, what's he doing here already, or what's he I'm going now. What's he going to do? What's he doing in there?
But by the same token, that got wrong in a fairly major way. And I think what it's done is set a really interesting precedent for me, is that however hard I work now since that time, it's almost been like, well, it's not as bad as that. So my threshold for bad in terms of workload is totally skewed, because when it was bad, it was insane. Like, you know, so when I just to add a bit of context, I suppose, in January 23, I moved from the school I was head at in Plymouth to a school that had gone into special measures. And kind of Jen and I, Mrs. Binden, for the podcast purposes,
we'll edit out you calling her Jen, just so she doesn't.
Thanks, mate. I know that's strong, isn't it? Like, we've made a decision as a family to say, if you're going to do this, like, there's going to be 6 months where you're literally just going to disappear up your own arsehole, because there's so much work to do, and in complex settings, you've got to have your fingers in all the pies. However, I think our learned experience of that type of, you know, 2013, when we worked together, like, I just kind of knew that was not going to be sustainable, that after 6 months, if I'm still working at that rate of knots, I've got 6 months in me, but also just being older and just a little bit more switched on and a little bit more less pig-headed about it, I was like, I've got one school in me like this, and I've got one run at it, because I won't have that level of energy and commitment and time and determination as I get older. And you know, and I also like talk about that life balance, and I just didn't have it then, whereas now it's much more important to me.
That's amazing perspective, Binders. I think so I work in schools, and have done for 20 years, and have been in relationships with people that have been on senior leadership teams, and I see, I'm kind of surprised by your perspective, because I think some people just chase the idea of promotion, with no regard for what's this going to do to me, and how am I able to do this. And I think there are other roles where people don't really understand and appreciate. I mean, outside of education as well, where people don't really take stock of, look, what am I going to have to give in order to A, just do this, but B, make it a success. And I think that's quite a surprising level of perspective you've got.
And I suppose, as I sit here and reflect on it, I think loads of that just comes from experiences that I think when I took on the first leadership role, when I worked with Brad, I didn't really know what that was like. I left there after 4 years and went to another school and did a leadership role. So I think that you're right, and that's really interesting to play back, is that the first time we'd ever had an active conversation about it was to say, if you're going to move to a school in complex circumstances, let's think about it and weigh up the pros and cons, and weigh up what's really important to us as a family and how doable this is versus what's, you know, hopefully going to be really important for that school in moving them on. But like, I was 38, 39 before that conversation took place. And, you know, when, you know, like us, when you've been in schools for 20 years, that's super late to have made, you know, I'm a job hopper. Like, my new role will be my 7th role in education. I've kind of moved around a bit, and that suits me. I like that. It keeps me fresh and sharp, and, you know, and I learn new things. But yeah, I think the first time ever having that conversation without it going, yes, the next logical progression, or you go from an assistant to a deputy, or deputy to a head, because education is so progressive. That's just obviously what you do when you know, you want to move on. So yeah, no, I think that's a really fair point.
Yeah. No, well, thanks very much. I'm very intelligent, so.
I think it's really important. I think it's one of those, you know, and I think probably again lots of men in a similar situation, you go through it, and again probably relating this to my personal experience, a little bit blinkered, a little bit tunnel vision. You know, you get involved in the career if the career's the thing. And it becomes exciting, and it becomes promotion, and all of the good causes as well that you talk about. You know, I can, if I get this jump, I can impact more people and make things better for more people. But I think it's probably quite rare for a man to step away from that and speak to Mrs. Binden or whoever the missus is, and the kids, and actually reflect on, okay, what do we want, and am I really weighing up this in a way that is healthy, and actually thinking about what it's going to do.
And I suppose for us, where that kind of, the kind of pace of work that, I was involved in kind of 2013. I think because that, had consequences and it made me a bit poorly. I suppose, the whole purpose of podcasts like this is that actually my learning came from falling over and picking myself up and going, that's never going to happen again, to how do you talk to people before they fall over? And that was absolutely one of our drivers to say, listen, we've seen this go wrong before. And actually you just chucking your body at it in hours and hours didn't pan out very well, did it, last time, Poppet? So should we do it differently this time? And I think one of the things that, I feel really strongly about is I deliver on a course called the National Professional Qualification for Senior Leaders. And I do it partly because I think it's really interesting to work with people from other schools and their other lived experience. But actually, I also have a slight bent into it to say, this is the cohort of leaders, and obviously this podcast is about men's mental health, but actually all of those aspiring leaders who I just see and listen to going, just hammer and tongs and about the next run up the ladder, and I'm doing this, and it's been really interesting. I'm in the middle of delivering my second cohort.
So for the sake of the podcast, Brad and I just whacked in a really heavy nod in synchronicity when you were talking about people just throwing their bodies into it. Obviously, I then realised that our listeners wouldn't hear that. But yeah, there was firm agreement from both of us.
I mean, to be fair, once they see the thumbnail on the podcast of our three faces, then there's no way they're not watching.
Yeah, obviously.
But actually, I feel like that's where I've got something to offer to say, guys, there's a different way to do this, and can I play back to you that actually going at it like this and the culture and in the way in which you're working and the team that you're in, I just think you need to be mindful, you need to be super cautious, you need to kind of be really present in terms of what's going on before it's too late and you think, hang on a minute, this has gone south really quickly. So as much as you do all the leadership styles and you talk to people about culture and bits and pieces, I also feel really strongly about how do you get this right early days as opposed to having your first conversation about whether this is the right move for you when you're in your late 30s. So there's a bit in that for me as well.
I've got an observation from what you've said, and you've answered a question that I had in my head, but I'm going to put it out there anyway. So the question was going to be along the lines of, you described yourself as a job hopper, and how is it that you feel able to do that? Because I know a lot of people in education and in other industries that kind of, they got into their job in their, I don't know, early 20s, and then they stuck with it, and there's almost a kind of, maybe a fear of leaving the certainty and the security of that job and going somewhere else. But I think the answer that I'm drawing out from what you've just said is that whatever happened in 2013, that fall or that dent, that knock, whatever happened, I think that might have removed your fear of it going south, because you've done that and you've realised I can pick myself up again and I can go 100%. On from there. I don't know if that is an accurate...
No, 100%. And I think, one of the things I always say to people, like, if you take the positives, from all of this stuff, if you gave me a choice sat here now about whether to go through it again, and feel really rubbish for a period of time and, cause doubt about whether you were going to go back to education and that sort of stuff, 100% do it again. And that sounds super weird. So why would you go back to that kind of...
That's what I'm fascinated to hear. Why would you?
Yeah, big time, because I've just learned so much about myself. It's that classic human condition. Everything in society, education, health, police, prisons, everything's reactive. So actually I learned all of those techniques about like being present, and I went through a real phase of doing some mindfulness. Like at the moment, I got a new phone a couple of months ago, and on the iPhone they've got a journal app. Since I've had it, I've got back into 3 appreciations a day, and my pattern goes, if I'm feeling wobbly, I kind of smash my mental health kit and go, right, you need to be mindful and present and eat vegetables and go running. But by that point, I'm kind of already on the slide. So although I've got this first aid kit, like this, first aid kit for when I feel wobbly, actually, I'm so aware of my own signs and symptoms now, I never get to the wobbly bit because I go, oh, that felt a bit rubbish today. And, it all sounds a bit twee and stuff.
It's not. This is kind of one of the things we're fighting against, of men in particular, coming up with stuff that's pragmatic and helpful and useful and has tangible benefits. and then thinking to themselves, it's a bit twee, or it's a bit shit, or it's a bit coy, or whatever. It's not. If it works, it works. So what is it?
Yeah. The one and one of the things that I did, and it had a profound impact for such a small thing. It's a quote from somewhere, and I can't remember where. And I was thinking about it before coming on here, and I think it was Tom Hanks on Graham Norton. And he was talking about however good, fame feels, or how difficult your movie flop is, or whatever. He just said, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
And that was my screensaver. And, when I was feeling a bit wonky, I got really good at the difference between, I'm having a funny 5 minutes and I've just had a rubbish day, or that was a rubbish meeting, or today didn't go very well, to actually, this is 3 or 4 days now. So this too shall pass has had a really profound impact on me, because it's just something that has really stuck with me, and it's small but super impactful in how I think about when I'm, not feeling great.
I've seen that same piece of video, and I think one of the things that makes it so powerful is that he doesn't just frame it around the negative. He doesn't just say, everything's going bad, don't worry, it'll go.
Yeah.
I think it has validity and legitimacy, because he talks about when you're on top of the world and everyone loves you.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
going to pass as well. You're not always going to be at the top of the tree. So everything comes to pass. So I think people tend to reject advice when it's just like, oh, it's only one bad day and you'll move on, because you could just be saying that shit to make people feel better. Whereas if the good stuff passes and the bad stuff passes, it all passes.
Interesting that you would do it again, but it kind of took me to, again, the kind of purpose of this podcast is that that's nice in the sense of that is your choice, because it allowed you to discover so much about yourself. I guess the purpose of what we're trying to do is to, in doing this and in sharing all of these things, is to get in there, like you said, like you deliver on your courses before the fall. Because whilst, I think all of us have probably got things that we might sit here about now and be like, yeah, that was awful. But in a similar vein, I would go through it again because it actually made me who I am now. But would we want our kids to fall? No, we probably wouldn't. And that's where kind of this sharing, this discussing now, and you do it with your cohorts about sharing tips and tricks and little pieces of advice, and actually think about what is your perspective on this, and have you thought about the wider impact? Because if we can do that, we can get all of that same learning, hopefully, without necessarily having the fall, would be one of my takes from that.
Yeah, without question. And I think it's really interesting to kind of look at where the next generation consume their information from, and how do we get some of those messages in a format that isn't, a lesson at school to say, here are 10 things, what is it that they're watching, reading, kind of consuming, that just has that, kind of positive mental attitude slant on it. And, I think when you guys, Brad, when I spoke to you about just putting some snippets out there, I think that's the start of a real step change. And I think there's some awesome stuff out there. There was that Great Dave campaign, Andy's Man Club is on the back of, buses and stuff in Plymouth. And I suppose I take particular notice of those sort of things, but I think anything like this is amazing, just to kind of change that narrative and dialogue, which is, why it was so cool that you guys kind of asked me to come and talk to you about it.
I think a big part of the message is that whole idea that not just that you can prevent the fall, but also that if there is a fall, you can get back up. This is a slightly abstract example, but we'll go with it. I was fascinated when I discovered that lots of MotoGP riders, once they're all suited up for the race, roll around on the racetrack, literally physically get down on the road and roll around. They call it introducing their leathers to the road. And they feel as if they've introduced their leathers to the road, they're less afraid of getting that low to the ground. They're less afraid of that fall, because they don't have that sort of nervous static around, I can't get down there. They have to be loose, they have to be fluid, and they have to not have the fear. And actually, once metaphorically other people's leathers have been introduced to the ground, like yours were in 2013, then you're less afraid of getting down there again. And you're more...
big time.
Well, you're less afraid of getting down there. So actually, you're less likely to get down there, because you're not going to make mistakes. You're not going to be tight and rigid, and you're going to be more skilled, more fluent.
And I suppose one of the things that is really interesting to me about this kind of topic area is exactly what we're talking about is how do you change this narrative from talking about the absence of adversity to the promotion of positive? Is that actually mental health is, do you know what, if I'm more present, and me and Mrs. B went for a walk into the village yesterday, happened to end in a pub, but do you know what,
Lucky.
just like, it was sunny, like there's loads of blossom out, like we live near a river, like just noticing stuff to say, and none of that's because I wasn't in a great mood. It was all, there's loads of amazing stuff around me. Like, I'm super grateful for, like at the moment, I'm super grateful for the sun. Like, and if you can be in a mindset where actually, that a star in your solar system is something that you're grateful for, that's not because I've had a crap day. I just want to look for positive things. And I think that's the other end of the spectrum. Yeah, we do want to learn from when people fall over. And actually the positive in that for me is I haven't fallen over since. And that's because I did some learning. However, how do we, my eldest son yesterday, like did a proper like teenage day of Tom Clancy Rainbow Siege headset on, like food in his room. And I was like, and I'm sat here thinking now going, where do we put the positive in that day other than he's connecting with people, but it's all talking about shooting other people. And and I think that is something that, this sort of stuff is huge about. Just kind of look around you and be grateful. Like, and I'm not sure grateful is the right word, but just kind of look at all the cool stuff that you've got, as well as sometimes what the rubbish bits are.
What's interesting out of what you just said there for me is I've heard the word "but" as being the great eraser of you put in a positive. He's connecting with people, and then you erased it with "but." He's connecting with people. I mean, and yeah, sure, we'd love our kids to spring out of bed at 6:30 in the morning and have a bowl full of vegetables for breakfast and come on a run and whatever else. But like the reality is, it's not that likely to happen. Certainly. But he's connecting with people. Yesterday, he had a day of connecting with people. You can look at it in different ways, can't you? And sure, maybe don't do that all day, every day. But yesterday, he connected with people.
And I think that's what we've tried to, and we talk, in all three of us work in schools, and, we are in a privileged position where we talk to lots of families to say, what am I going to do about him? And we he's on his phone all the time, and we just talk about balance. Like both of my, we're lucky, both of the boys, play sport. They both play football, they both play rugby. So actually they do that outside bit. They do know that school's really important and they work hard. And, we say to families all the time, listen, the phone's not the enemy. Like there's loads of good stuff on a phone. Like the internet's got some amazing stuff, but it's about moderation and it's about what are they looking at, how much they're looking at, and what else do they do. And that's a huge piece. Particularly in the special school world that we talk about is that sometimes it's just being a kid. As well, at the moment, that's what kids do, and that we couldn't talk to people when we were playing the Super Nintendo or the Mega Drive or whatever it is. So you're right, Nibbo, that's a positive aspect of it, whereas once upon a time, everyone was sat in their rooms on their own. Actually, now there is a real social network to it, and that is a positive side to it.
One thing just before we move on from that, I just thought actually, because we didn't really go down that hope road, which is fine, because that's not what you chose, but obviously in what you do, I just think it's probably important to recognise that you probably give most of the people you come into contact with hope, whether it be kids, parents, carers, colleagues, and that is a nice thing. And I think that probably links to the admiration part, and certainly in our more recent paths crossing from a school work perspective, as much as it pains me to say it, I know you were highly admired by the colleagues and spoken very highly of. I think that's because of your approach, but I also think some of that learning that you did for yourself on a personal level, you by default share, even indirectly. So I just thought that's a nice little touch to go on to. But yeah,
thanks, mate.
Let's move on. So next, would you rather, Binders? So we're going to take a slightly different slant on this one. Would you rather feel overwhelmed, or would you rather feel guilt?
So I'm much clearer on this one because with overwhelm, I can do something about that, because I think one of the things in our job, in our world, and particularly I think from a headship point of view, and I've been fortunate enough to do it twice now, overwhelm for me is about just like clinical organisation in terms of life, your work. Like overwhelmed for me has, when I felt it is I'm out of control. So what have I got to do to put it back in control? Guilt is about other people, and for me, it's about let down, and it's about other people, my emotion towards other people and what I've not done. So I feel like I can do something about overwhelm. I can manage it. I can plan for it. I can be super pragmatic about it. Guilt, I can't work out what you do about it. And I think that for me is always a challenge, because when I can't plan for it and I can't do something really tangible with it, I don't love it. So give me overwhelm, because I can deal with that.
Brad, Binders was such a shout, because I think his answers are those last two answers are so representative of a lot of men. That whole idea about tangibility and pragmatism and what's real, what's physical, what can I action, what can I change. I think there is logical. I don't always want to do all of this compared to women, but I think women are more, like Matt said, sort of ethereal and theoretical, whereas I think an awful lot of men would have similar answers to Matt Binder's in terms of, what can I actually get off my arse and do something about?
And I suppose this goes back to my default position is, if I feel overwhelmed, if for the next 48 hours I've got to put a shift in, because that's how I'm going to manage it, and actually I am going to get up an hour earlier, and I'm going to stay a bit later. And actually, I think the difference between me now and me then is that I am braver at saying to people, mate, I can't meet you today, because that's about me, because actually I need that hour to get my shit together. And if Brad wants a meeting, I'm going to meet with Brad because he needs something from me. And actually, if Nibbo needs a meeting, I'm going to meet with Nibbo, and I'm going to put everyone else's needs. And I think being ahead, you get that all the time. Like, people are popping into your office, and it always starts with, have you got a minute, or I can see you're busy. And sometimes,
knowing smirks from Nibbo and Brad.
And sometimes I'll say, yeah, come in. And you do that thing where you go, and I can't be present in those conversations because I'm sat there looking at you going, get out. I am so busy. I love you, and you do wonderful things for our children. But actually, you're talking to me about the paint colours for your new classroom, and you're really cross that nobody's talked to you about it for what's happened in the summer holidays. So sometimes I go, actually, like, if you speak to Wendy, I'm super happy to talk to you, but I need to book you in because I've got stuff on. I would say that was one of my challenges, was that I just wanted to, that differential between people pleaser and approval seeker. I can say no now because that overwhelm is something I can do about. Your paint is a different ball game at the moment, and that's not going to do me any favours. And fundamentally, it's not going to do you any favours either, because you get that learned helplessness. If you all come to the head, and unfortunately it happens, there are so many people that go past your door, see that you're in there, and go, I'll forget everything else. He can sort it. He has ultimate authority over that thing, and he can sort that stupid fucking problem that I've got and make it go away without breaking step of going, oh, I wonder if he's actually really busy, and making something stupid on my desk go away is part of his world. So I definitely think that is something that I have been able to control. And when I started at the special measures school, there was no doubt about it. There was points of overwhelm, but I had a plan for how to get out of it.
Okay, so we've talked about overwhelm and your experience of that. So why guilt then? Why, i.e., why not guilt? Why would you not want to feel guilt? What experience have you got of that?
Yeah, and that's really interesting, because I suppose as I'm sat here now, I know I've got guilt, but I think I wonder if I've done that thing and I've blocked it. Okay. And the guilt thing, I think, predominantly comes from a family perspective, because externally, your mums and dads and brothers and bits and pieces are super proud. On the surface of things, you're really successful, you do good work, you work hard, be kind, make a difference, all of those sort of things. From a family point of view, that's where the guilt kicked in, because I was out crazy hours. I have definitely been guilty of not being present. And Jen's really good. She kind of calls me out to say, put your phone down. And even when I'm not on my phone or I'm not on my laptop, she'll say to me, you're not here. Yeah. So that, sometimes those brutal kind of stabs in the rib go, okay, yeah, fair. Like, that's not cool. So I think in our kind of family unit, that's where the guilt's been. But again, I think from a positive perspective, sometimes you just, and I know you don't always want to get it wrong to get it right. However, sometimes, having a network of people around you that can say, we've got to do this differently. And the other guilt is a super personal one. I have, and Brad knows this, I have a crazy unhealthy relationship with food. And I'm a total emotional eater. And it's probably the hunger of an Indian coming that is skewing me. But I eat something and then I go, I shouldn't. I have that immediate, it's not big and highly emotional and life changing. But I go, I shouldn't have eaten that. That's not good for me.
I shouldn't have had that 12th onion bhaji.
Yeah, and still be really mad when people have the audacity to say, "Come on, onion bhaji." You go, no. And just have that immediate reaction. So yeah, there's I suppose there's big guilt and little guilt.
Yeah, what jumps out to me there is I think a lot of the stuff you talked about, you highlighted the importance of the people around you, family. A lot of the time you talked about, but then you talked about networks and how much of an influence. I think people often forget. We were talking yesterday. About how responsible people are for their own mental health, but actually that takes away from there's several other factors that influence a person's mental health. And actually, if you're talking about that guilt, your family and your network play a large role in your feelings of guilt, or the absence of feelings of guilt, and you said also about them being proud of you, then those people are having a really important impact on your mental health, positive, and hopefully not as much negative, because the guilt is less there than there is pride in what you do and the difference you make.
And I think you want to reciprocate that as well. And I think one of the things that has been really important for me is that boys don't know how to use words properly. And I know that's a gross stereotype. However, you do get some nuggets. And when your mates have been through some really rough stuff and you just say, all right, mate, just want to let you know I'm keeping you in mind. And that for me is that I hope you're okay, or I think, and it probably comes back to my aversion to hope, is that I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. And for blokes in particular, I think some of that challenge around mental health is they don't know what the words are. They want to convey a message. They don't want it to be perceived as a particular type of message. So having some really key, clear language and being brave enough to go, mate, I'm just keeping you in mind. Give me a shout if you need me.
Yeah,
it sounds really tiny, but I just think that sort of thing, it would be a massive step change. And how do I teach my boys that as they get older to say, listen, mate, your boy's gone through a pretty tricky time. Mum and dad this, school this, rugby this, whatever. How do you get that drop in? Is that somebody's passed your thoughts to say, do you know what? I'm just going to let them know I'm there. And I think there's something in that, and I don't know what it is, but
do you
it's
think
something for me?
I could well be wrong here, and you might just come back with the straight. No, I don't think that. But do you think maybe the focus is in the wrong place, or that something could be added to the sphere, which is not necessarily words? Because I think men tend to think of practical things and tangible things, and words are observable. Do you think there's actually room in the male mental health spectrum for the unobservable and the non-vocal or non-verbal, where you maybe just sit with someone, where you maybe just share space with someone? And where I'm kind of coming back to with that is, in my line of work, we did some training on something called intensive interaction, which you might have experienced as part of your role, but and how it was with really challenged pupils with profound and multiple learning difficulties. It's about kind of mimicking, but actually that it was applicable to pupils with moderate learning difficulties, where you might sit side by side with them rather than face on face, and interact with them by picking up the game controller that's on the same game that they're playing, and you are now interacting there on the screen that's in front of both of you. You're not in that confrontational face-to-face view, and you might not even actually need to say anything, but you're interacting. You're physically next to each other. You're interacting on the screen in front of you, and are you connecting there? And do men not credit that enough because it's not observable? Or am I just barking up a wrong tree?
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I suppose what I'm trying to do is conceptualise that if you're two 20-something blokes and what that looks like if you both live at home, etc., etc. I suppose one of the things that in terms of that observable behaviour and kind of being sat is that I think what boys don't do very well is silence. Is that we get super awkward, we don't really know what to do with it. So actually, I'll just say something for the sake of saying something, and then I think we all know in work that we've done, sometimes you being sat there and holding your nerve gets them to start that conversation. And though when you do that, sometimes that's when the nuggets come out.
Yeah, man.
That actually, because they're thinking about, I've got something to say, I want to say something, am I going to do it? So I do wonder if that observable behaviour and that kind of being present with someone is just giving them space to initiate that conversation. And I think in education, we get really skillful at coaching and navigating conversations and getting staff to where we need to get to. If you ask my brother, he would say, I'm the world's greatest manipulator. And when somebody comes in and says, I want to work 1 hour a week and I want to be paid twice as much and and actually the skill of that conversation, getting them out of your office to go, no, you're going to stay full time, and that you're going to be happy about it, etc., etc. But I do think we're so used to getting people to where we need to get them to from a professional point of view. Sometimes just letting it go and letting them start that conversation is so I don't think we do very well at all.
Matt and I had a conversation yesterday about the masking, you all right, mate? Yeah. It's what are your masks? What are you, if somebody asks you if you're okay and you're actually starting to feel that kind of overwhelmed, what are your kind of go-to masks? That's probably my first question.
Distance is one, because I think that I don't mask brilliantly well. So the best way not let people see that you're struggling is be at work longer, go out for a walk, and because actually if you can't see me, you can't see what's going on. And then actually I also know that when I'm struggling, I get real back pain. I hold all that tension in here, so actually I'm really grumpy because I'm just absolutely really tightly wound. So I would say I just talk a little bit less, and even that distance, because what I'm trying to do is not engage in a conversation because I'm worried I'm going to snap or I'm going to say something or I'm going to talk about work or something. So all of it kind of, I'm either out or I'm checked out are probably the two main ones for me.
There's two things I want to jump straight in on.
My follow-up to that.
Brad is following up. Go on, Brad.
That's it.
Naturally, no, don't go on, Brad. Stay there a minute, Brad. Let me have this. Wait, so one thing I just want to share is that when you said about that moving away, I found it really interesting when I heard of that recently referred to as the dying cat. That often if a cat gets hit by a car, they take themselves away. They're not dead yet, but they take themselves away and they just get worse and worse and worse. And they have no appreciation that actually they could be helped. That I've had a very good friend of mine, his cat got hit by a car and they found him days later, only recently passed away. And if that cat had just come forth and said, not that cats can talk, but if they'd found the cat and realised the cat needs help, we can provide help for the cat. The cat doesn't quite understand what help we're able to provide it, but we can give this cat help. The cat could have still been alive.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to that pre-bit. Jen knows now that those are my masks. So what happens is that when things are really good, we'll talk. We've had lots of conversations over the years to say, when this happens and this happens, this is me telling you without telling you I'm struggling. And then what Jen has got really skillful at is playing it back to me to say, do you remember when you told me that when you're working loads and you're not really talking very much, that actually you've given me permission to say, I'm going to play back to you that all those things that you tell me that when you're struggling are now happening. So if it's the first time that you ever hit that kind of slippery slope, it's really tricky. But actually, we have got really good at saying, I'm just going to play back to you this is all the shit that happened last time, or
Yeah.
like, I don't care what you're going to say to me next, you're not right, and I'm just going to put it out there, and you can't unhear it. But you know that I know, and I know that you know, and that kind of
What I'm
that
chuckling
kind of
at is the
conversation.
I don't care. I think that's so important to have people in their lives that go, look, because I care about you, I don't care what you're going to say about this, but because I care about you, you
sometimes
can shut up and listen.
And the biggest thing for me, and someone in our family has just been through a really rocky patch, the biggest thing for me is that the minute that somebody calls it out, the minute I've ever gone to a doctor, the minute I've said my back hurts and there's something, and like we can talk about in our house, my back hurts, and I don't quite know why at the moment, but there's something going on there in my subconscious, and you know, about work, about money, about all the normal life stuff, and I know. And almost not being able to articulate, I don't know what's wrong. And I think sometimes we're so conditioned to go, what's wrong? And you want to go, unfortunately, my car is a piece of shit and it costs me £500 a week and we can't keep going like this. You know, I think the human condition is that you want there to be a really definitive answer. Sometimes I've been a bit wonky and I don't know why.
Yeah, man.
I can't put my finger on it. There are possible things in it, but I can't be clear about it. And I think, you know, when I've been to the doctors, when I've gone for a massage, when Jen's like, what the fuck? Like, sometimes that's enough to go, okay, something's going on here. Let's crack on here, boys, and work out what this is about without ever knowing. And sometimes those things were, you know, this too shall pass. Something's not right, and I don't know what it is, but we're just going to kind of keep it on the boil, and we're just going to let that simmer, and we're just going to... You know, we're going to keep an eye on it. So I think giving people permission to call you out if you are reflective enough to know what things are wrong with you. One of my mates put a post on Facebook the other day, and you know, he's had a really tricky time. And like, I just said, mate, what was all that about? Like, let's have it, because you don't do that. Like, you know, he's super private, and obviously, you could see it. It was a 3 o'clock in the morning post. Something had just gone wrong, and the next day I was like, mate, we've got to talk about that. And he's like, I know.
No, that's really important to have those mates around, isn't it?
That's it. And I get, again, two more questions that I'm conscious again about Jeff. Jeff can't be too far away now with this takeaway. Everyone's tummy's rumbling. But you know, when that's simmering and you're like, oh, there's something. What are you doing? What works for you? How do you manage that?
And I suppose it goes back to what Nibbo said. I almost flip into that, and I can't remember which bit of your brain it is. Super systemized a bit. Is that if there's something going on, there is a process of elimination, or there is a system I can apply to say what's going on at work, what's going on at home, what's going on with this, what's going on with that, to try and, you know, be super logical about what of those things are the most likely, you know, protagonist here. And then once I whittle that out to go, and sometimes the active thought of going, I wonder if you're a bit more worried about this meeting than you think you are. I wonder if you're a bit more worried on behalf of, like, one of my lads is a gymnast, so he performs or I almost can't watch. Like, I'm one of those dads. So sometimes, you know, it's even stuff like that I go, I wonder if I'm more worried about that on his behalf than he is, and that's what's just getting, and you know, and as much as you're like, that's amazing, like, you know, gymnastics is so cool and we're super proud of you, like, I'm worried, you know, and it's that, you know, like circle of control, circle of influence bit, and I have, you know, and I've had a work coach, you know, for the 5 years that I worked in my current trust, and like, some of those sessions were super intense, but what she's really good at doing is just kind of going, I wonder if there is something going on here that you're kind of not with, and like, you know, that is definitely something that I've talked to the, you know, prospective leaders, people in leadership teams, like that kind of impartial coaching, because your mates and your family are really important, but sometimes you do need someone separate that is not, you know, invested in you, or what mood you're going to come in, or you're my mum or dad, and actually you're always going to say things to me in a different way. So sometimes that professional objectivity has been massive for me to kind of, you know, that, you know, she talks to me about being up on the balcony. What if I was stood on the balcony looking at me now, what would you see going on down there? And just those little kind of, you know, those little techniques are just, you know, all sorts of things that I can, you know, I have applied in the past to go, okay, let's work on this, let's sort it out.
Yeah, important answers, I think, they're Binders. What was I remembered the thing that I was going to, it was a really short thing to just point out. And it's just that I think a lot of people know or are aware that absenteeism from work is an indicator of poor mental health or worsening mental health. But I think people forget that presenteeism can also be being at work, can be an indicator of poor mental
Yeah,
health
that's really
or
interesting.
worsening mental health. And actually interesting that you were talking about your work and your family and how you might work more and be at home less. So actually, one group of people, i.e. your colleagues, are going to see more of you, and another group of
Yeah.
people, your family, are going to see less of you. And then it becomes slightly self-fulfilling because, as we've already covered, your family have a big positive impact on your mental health, and it's often work that can have a negative impact on your mental health. But when our men, plural, when our mental health is worsening, we tend to gravitate towards those places that cause it to worsen even more and away from our family and friends who could actually help our mental health improve. There you go, Brad.
And
I've stopped interrupting you now.
I think there's something really interesting in that, because I have a particular view about that in terms of the unconditional support. Is that actually, if I'm not doing a very good job at work, people tell on me, and everybody talks about me, and there is a real kind of, well, actually, I'm going to speak to his boss. He's not doing this. Like, when you've got a great family set up, they love you, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and I know that that's not finite, but I almost feel safer with the people at home who will protect me when I'm making a total fucking pig's ear of it. Whereas if I'm making a total fucking pig's ear of it at work, I'm not protected in the same way, because people don't invest in you. And actually, when you're in that, that leadership position, and when you sit in the big chair, people are not as sympathetic. They're like, yeah, like, you might be having a rough time, but you're the boss. Like, you should be in charge. You've got to fucking sort this shit out.
Deal with it.
I think one of the things to pick up on, because again, the purpose of what we're doing is like men, which we all are, with an ability to talk, which we all can, but to actually recognise there, and you did it from a professional point of view, like actually somebody coaching you, somebody set aside, but actually that reducing the stigma, I guess, of speaking to somebody. Whether that be somebody within a work capacity who is external, and I know lots of schools have that, or whether it is actually, do you know what, I need to talk to somebody who's not my family and doesn't protect me in the way like you've just described. And that, I think, can be a huge relief when somebody does go and seek that professional help in whatever shape or form that is. Whether it be an Andy's Man Club, or whether it be, actually, no, I'm going to go and speak to a counsellor. There's a fantastic hypnotherapist in Cornwall. But actually, just that actually, yeah, like, I've got these networks, but there's also this string to that bow, and there's a real fear of pulling at that string for men. So I guess we've got to really break down this barrier of us talking in order to then be prepared to take the leap to talk to a professional who might give us that completely unbiased view and help us rationalise things and move forward.
And I think, for want of another shitty analogy, like, for me, it's a bit of a selection box. Is that if you take blokes and counselling, in friends I've spoken to, I'll say, listen, like, there is no one solution, and it's lots of bits of it. And do you know what? If you open the counselling bar of chocolate and you bite the top off it and it's fucking disgusting and you hate it, then you just leave. Like, there is no risk to it. And I think people just get so fixated with, I can't, I won't, I don't know, that actually, I think we've got a real, role in our peer groups to say, what have you got to lose? Like, chuck a few quid at it. And, and you know what? And just because that counselling session, I had a really interesting conversation with a mate, and he said he spent most of his time, like, he'd made the decision to, like, he needed to talk to someone, but finding the right person. And I said, and even if you don't find the right person, don't fixate on it. You just haven't got a bond with them. And also, you wouldn't expect to have a bond, if we go back to our kind of work, you wouldn't have a bond with a class on the first time that they walk in there. So, like, sometimes you've just got to be really pragmatic about, what do you think the barriers here are, mate? And that none of them are insurmountable. Is that if you try it and you don't like it, then try somebody else. And if you do 3 or 4 sessions with different people and it's not your jam, maybe that's not for you. You just have a different chocolate bar out of the box to get you what you need. So, sometimes I think we almost get in our own fucking way about how complicated it is, when sometimes actually we can make it less complicated by just, by almost calling it out.
Yeah,
I like the
totally
selection
agree.
box thing because I think we can often be like, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try this, but I won't try talking to somebody that I won't
Yeah,
know, that
yeah,
I don't know. We'll try
yeah,
everything. Oh, I'll go to the gym, or I'll go in the sea. I'll go for a run. Oh, no, talk to a stranger? No way. Who's
yeah.
person who's fully qualified in order to help us. But you're so right. I think you've got to find the right person, and and also I guess the right type of therapy. There's lots there, but cool. Okay, let's move on. Nibbo, dessert
Yeah,
questions.
should we bang through these nice and quick? Because I'm conscious Jeff's nearly here with the curry and all the trimmings, which I'm
He's
like
looking
an
for the
hour in.
house.
I am
We're,
craving
we're on a
that.
we're on a new estate, so yeah, they usually it's not on the sat nav, so it is a problem.
I can hear his moped going up and down. Anyway, just and you've probably only got a minute to answer this. Anyway, if you had a minute with your 8-year-old self, what would you tell him?
Yeah,
What would you advise him?
that's a great question.
And he's literally just walked in. You don't get a big opportunity to.
Yeah, I can picture him. Um, do you know what's just popped into my head, which is not the best advice, but I remember being quite anxious as a kid. And like when you work with complex children in school, like, and sometimes you see people say you just need to calm down. Like I would almost want words that are much more effective than worry less.
Yeah,
Like and I'd try and be much more pragmatic about how to go about it, but like I have got that memory of being fairly anxious, I think, as a kid, so I'd want to do something for him to go, it's all right, like, it's cool.
I think that's remarkable to hear that a man in that's had several senior leadership roles actually, as an 8-year-old, was the kid that worried too much.
Yeah,
And
that's
actually,
interesting.
he's gone from there to where you are now. Right, he's gone. He's left the room. The 18-year-old you, 18-year-old you has just walked in. What are you going to tell that guy?
And the first reaction's usually the right one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that.
Let's find out.
Well, yeah, don't be a prick. Like I
There's
just
the
don't be a
lesson.
prick.
Oh, you're talking to yourself, not me.
I got a real memory of 18-year-old me. Like I had a good part-time job. I was in the gym. I had nice clothes. I really like girls and beer, and like I was just like, if I look at him now, go, you, like, part of me says you're so 18, and like being a prick at 18 is part of the MO, but there are some of my behaviours at 18 that I would have gone, mate, you just need to chill out a bit and like wind your neck in.
Well, you'll never guess what. He's just left. And now 80-year-old you has just walked in, and you've got the opportunity to ask him stuff. Is there anything you want to know from him? He's got a bad back, by the way.
Definitely. Yeah, I suppose, interestingly, everything I've said about pragmatism and systemizing and doing it, the question I would want to ask him is, are you proud? Like, of your kids, your family, your life, the work you did, the difference you made. Like, and I suppose you can quantify that to a degree, and I think in our world that is easier because you do make a difference, and you'll see the output of your children and what they go on to do. But that's quite an interesting response, I suppose, as I'm reflecting on myself, to say, like, that's quite an emotional response for me.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that's what I want to know, and yeah, so I suppose that's it.
I find that really interesting in terms of, I'm almost getting a sense that you're wanting to seek approval from now your 80-year-old
Yeah,
self. Is it
yeah.
the things that you are doing now, has that garnered approval from 80-year-old you?
And I suppose my coach, she had a really great phrase, and it stuck with me. And she's helped me. She talks about leaving well in my, my current role and moving on. She always says to me, "What do you want people to say about you when you hang up your boots?" And I suppose that's the other question to him. Say, what would people have said about you? Like, what would they have said about your life and who you were and what you did and what you stood for and what was important to you and in those sort of things. So I'd probably ask him that as well. I'd have 30 seconds on each question, and then he's probably fallen over and needs picking up because of his back.
Last thing he heard.
He won't exit quite as quickly because he can't move that well.
He said goodbye, but he's still leaving.
He's not sure why he came in the room in the first place.
Right, Curry's here. Brad, we need what takeaways from this conversation?
Well, again, I
got one.
think there's so many, isn't there? I think if you've got yours ready, go.
Yeah, well, mine is just, and it's not actually a tangible tip that people can do. It's just a thing to keep in mind that actually there's so much stuff that influences people's men's mental health, and the thing that we've really touched on here with Binders is family, families and networks around you, and actually that just being in the presence of those people can have a positive impact on your mental health. A, because of that unconditional love that Binders was talking about, but also B, because of that whole idea of being known so well that and so familiar with someone that they can tell you, shut up, stop talking, I'm going to tell you this because I care. I don't care what you're going to say because I care about you. And actually having those close bonds and those close connections and at times of difficulty, gravitating towards that rather than away from it, even if they're going to tell you something you don't want to hear. Because a lot of the time, A, they might tell you something that you want to feel like you're flying, and they might tell you you're really not. B, they might ask you a question, which I thought was fascinating, about what is it that's going on with you. And you don't want to be avoidant and say nothing, but sometimes you might genuinely not know. And so you don't want to have to say, I don't know, because you might seem like you're being avoidant. So yeah, I think people can sometimes retract away from their family and loved ones, but actually they're the people who have a massive positive impact on man's mental health.
Yeah, nice. My takeaway, now that I've had a bit more time to think about it, is about the openness actually, and how it's actually beneficial for all men, because Matt talked about the fall as he described, and a challenging time. But because we had spoken, and not in any great depth, we kind of worked together. We would class ourselves as friends as well as colleagues. Even though we didn't do loads outside of school, but there was an openness, and because Matt was open in terms of talking about, just the fact that he's struggling. I didn't need to know what it was about, but the fact that he had meant that later on down the line, when I was struggling, and Matt did that thing that he talked about, which is dropping me a message to say, just to let you know, I'm thinking about you. It actually had real weight. And it, because I do a similar thing to Matt. If I'm struggling, I bury away. I stop seeing the people that would probably help me out of the situation. I put my head down. I do more of the stupid stuff that I'm doing. That's probably got me to that point. But I think because he'd shared in the first place, knowing that he was there if I needed somebody to chat to, actually made me call him. I've never spoken to Matt so much as when I was struggling, which sat here now sounds really selfish, because actually I wish he'd spoken to me more and I'd been more available when he was struggling. But actually, I spoke to Matt low, and I just ring him in the car, and he was always there, and he would always chat, and it didn't matter what he said. I felt better after I spoke to him. So for me, there's kind of two there. There's his openness that allowed me to access, and then there is that, actually, do you know what, I need to ring Binders and just have a bit of a chat. That's my takeaway.
Are you saying that men can lead by example, demonstrate a positive approach to male mental health, in order that other men can then, so as Binders led by example, and was willing to be open and to share his vulnerability, you then learnt to follow in those footsteps and also to do the same, and that had a massively positive effect on your mental health?
I think that's what I am saying, Nibbo. I think that's what
that's
I am saying.
That's a bit like this podcast, isn't it?
And again,
much more eloquently than you put it.
But it's interesting because I think that whole idea of paying it forward now, because I think again I've spoken to people about that. So I now I've got mates who'll be like, yeah, just just ringing for a chat. And Nibbo, you and I had an experience yesterday, out when we were recording, and I was like, do you know what? I'm just getting a vibe that this person would like us to just pop in and just have a brew before we leave, and that's what we did. And we both kind of left saying, yeah, I think there was some value there for that person. So I think it allows us to pay it forward. So two guys that have come up with this concept of a podcast that encourages that, should probably get MBEs or something like that. I'd have said.
I think what's going to be really important is who plays you to when the Netflix get this series to obviously serialise it. So I just think you need to make sure that you have some creative responsibility on who the actors are going to be in this story.
Well, I've been likened. This is such a horrendous story. I've been likened to a Hollywood actor. My highest and lowest moment in my career came within 10 seconds of each other. Where a kid at school just came in, sat down in a PE lesson and said, "Sir, you look like that bloke out the Marvel movies." And I was like, "Which one? They're all like pretty good guys." And he's like,
"Strong start.
You look like the bloke that plays Thor with the beard and stuff." It's like, "Do I?" "Yeah, when he's all fat and given up on life." Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah. Great, fat Thor.
Job done.
Was that the doorbell?
Yeah.
Was that the doorbell?
Takeaways here. Listen,
doorbell.
We're gonna have to say, Binders. Well, two things quickly from me. One for both of the listeners that we've got, or that we're assuming we've got. What you've said and what you've shared is definitely going to help people that have listened to this.
Cool.
And I know it doesn't sound like actually there's any massive amount of theoretical detail in what we've talked about, but I really think it's that more informal conversation that really will help a lot of men. So on their behalf and from Brad and I, thank you very, very much.
No, thanks, mate.
And yeah, it's been brilliant. So yeah, thank you.
It's been really cool.
And also one more thing that with both the listeners, if they've taken away anything from what you've said that Brad and I haven't picked up, we want to hear from them. What they've learned from it, and obviously we'd feed that back to you as well and tell you, look, this guy got in touch and he found this bit useful, so we'll share that with you.
No, amazing. I'd love that.
Cool. Binders, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure as always.
No, it's rock and roll.
Cool. Take care, buddy.
Lovely
Thank
stuff.
you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.